Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotors on a 2002 Lexus RX300. Now the first thing that I like to do is push this caliper piston back inside the caliper to make room for the new thicker pad material and of course the thicker rotors. Now the easiest way that I've found to do that is just to use this little opening right here in the caliper and wedge a small little screwdriver or pry bar in there and pull it towards you slowly, which will pry that caliper piston back in, pushing the brake fluid up this line into the master cylinder. So it's very important that we pop the hood and go take a look and make sure that we have enough room in that master cylinder so that it's not going to overflow and make a big mess. So let's go do that now. All right, so here's our master cylinder right here, and you can see that our fluid level is well below the max line, so we should be okay to push that caliper piston back in, and it shouldn't overflow or make a big mess. Now, a lot of people ask me if you need to take this lid off before you push that caliper piston back in, and you really don't. You can if you'd like, but I like to leave this lid on as much as possible and not expose that brake fluid to the air, which has moisture, because brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning that it will absorb moisture, and that does cause it to degrade and go bad. There's very little resistance or difference between the resistance of taking this off or leaving this on. So in our case, because this is very transparent and we can still see through there, I'm just going to leave that lid on and push that caliper piston back in, and we should be good to go. As an alternate method, you could also open this little bleeder screw right here and put a little hose on there so that when you push the piston back in, the old fluid will come out of this bleeder screw rather than go up through this hose into the master cylinder. That's fine if you'd like to do it that way. It is a good way to cycle through your brake fluid. In this case, we're not going to change the brake fluid or open the hydraulic system. So in our case, we do not need to bleed the brakes once we're done. If you do open this, you probably will need to bleed the brakes after completing this job. Now, since we know we have enough room, I'm just going to grab my little pry bar here. This is the Mayhew Dominator, the straight pry bar. I really like this one. It just fits right in through this opening, and you're just prying and pulling that towards you, which it's prying against the edge or the body of the caliper, and that will allow this piston to push all the way back in. Now, usually once I do that, I can slide the caliper back and forth, but these slide pins are stuck pretty good. They're very stiff, so somebody must have used the wrong grease, or they're just really caked up and gunked up and dirty. We'll definitely be cleaning those as well, but that did allow us to move that back in a little bit. Now I'm going to shift the pry bar between the inside pad and the rotor now that there's room there. We're going to give it one last pull, and that should compress the piston the rest of the way. There we go. Yeah, those slide pins are pretty stiff, so we'll work on that here in a minute. All right, now we can loosen and remove these two caliper slide pin bolts, and I'm going to use a 14mm socket here on a long-handled ratchet. This is from Nepros. Just got this recently and really like it. Usually once you break those free, they'll just come right out. Now I'm going to pull the caliper off, and I just grabbed this little caliper hook. I'm just going to hook it right through here and hang that up on the coil spring up out of the way. You just don't want to let that dangle by the brake line if you can avoid that. All right, now we're going to pop out the old brake pads, and we'll take off the outside one here. Now they're pretty worn down, but not all the way metal to metal, but we were having a little bit of shaking, a little bit of vibration when braking, which is why we're also going to change out the rotors. All right, now we need to loosen and remove the caliper bracket bolts, and we need to use a 17mm socket. I'm just going to use this nano socket on the long-handled ratcheting wrench here. Break those loose. All right, once we break those loose, I'm just going to spin these off the rest of the way with the Milwaukee. Now, it's a good idea to have one hand on this bracket while you take this off, otherwise it'll drop to the ground. And we'll set that out of the way. All right, now if you live in a really rusty area, your rotor may not pop right off. Sometimes they do, you just give them a little tap here, but a lot of times they will rust to the hub right here along this shoulder. And so you can do a couple things. You know, you can use a big puller on here if you need it, if it's really bad, but it also comes with threaded holes here in the rotor. These are M8 by 1.25. You can grab a couple bolts and thread them in, and they'll basically act as a press or a 4-screw and press this rotor off the hub. Or you can also use this special tool right here. This is called the Rotor Remover 9000, or a lot of people just call it a Tanya Harding, and just give it a whack or two. And that usually will do the trick. All right, now before we put the new rotor on, I'm going to clean this up with a wire wheel and then hit it with a coat of anti-seize to make sure that the new rotor doesn't stick. If you're going to use a wire wheel or anything like that, make sure you wear some safety glasses. And I'm going to brush this with some of this anti-seize from Permatex. That really seems to do the trick and prevents those new rotors from sticking. Now you can see the new rotor is packed in some sort of an oil to prevent it from rusting. So it's important that we clean that off with some brake clean before we put this on. I'm just going to set it on here backwards for a second. If this is really wobbly like this, it helps to put a lug nut on at the bottom, just to hold the rotor steady while we're putting that bracket back on. All right, now we need to get this bracket cleaned up and ready to put back on. All right, now we just had to run to the parts store because our replacement pads did not come with these little clips right here. It is recommended that you change out this brake hardware here, these little abutment clips or retainer springs that will retain the pads in these little channels. If you don't change these out, a lot of times that will cause the pads to get hung up. You can see that these do wear out and it's important to change them out. The brake pads that we initially bought didn't come with them, so we just had to run to the parts store and pick up a new set that came with these. So we're going to go ahead and just pop these out. Now if you have to, you can clean these up on a wire wheel and reuse them, but it is recommended to replace them. And we also just want to try to clean up these little channels where those clips go. And I'm going to use a little wire wheel again on the drill. Just make sure that you do wear some safety glasses. All right, that looks pretty good. Now we're also going to pull out and clean and re-grease these slide pins. As I mentioned, these are pretty sticky. Look at that. They're really stuck in there. So let's pull these out. That looks like the grease is really caked on there. Really dry, really caked up. Now a lot of times if you use regular grease or petroleum-based grease, it will cake up like this and that causes these to stick. So we do need to clean this out really well, and we need to apply some clean caliper grease so that these won't get stuck again. Just gonna hit these with some brake cleaner. Now these look okay. If they get really old, they'll start to get pitted and you'll have to replace them, but these look all right. They're cleaning up pretty nice. Let's pull out the other one here too. Yeah, that is really, really stuck in there. Oh boy. Yeah, usually I can just pull these out. This is really stuck. I'm gonna spray some PB Blaster in here and see if that will break it free. See if that'll soak in and loosen this up a little bit. That's about as stuck as I've ever seen one. Sometimes these have little rubber bushings on them that will swell up, and that might be what's going on in here. It might be completely stuck. You know, we might have to take this over to the vise and see if we can pull it apart that way. Oh, there we go. We got it. And there it is. You see this little rubber bushing? It was kind of stuck and kind of coming out with it. So it's probably swollen, and that's what's causing that to get jammed up. Sometimes you can just take these off. They just help with a little bit of the vibration dampening. But sometimes, because you see these little relief cuts, sometimes I'll just take a little razor blade and slice that a little bit deeper and then put it back in. And that's almost like a release of pressure so that the grease can slide past that little bushing and it doesn't get bound up in there. The slide pin overall looks like it's in good shape. Like I said, we'll think about that bushing here for a minute. Maybe we'll reuse it, maybe we'll just leave it off. Now, as far as the bracket and these openings here, sometimes these little rubber boots will come off easily. These ones look like they're pretty well stuck on, so I'm not gonna take these rubber boots off. Instead, I'm just gonna spray brake cleaner directly in there and let it soak, and then I'm gonna brush it around and clean it and then dump them out a couple times. All right, I'm gonna sit that down and let it soak for a minute, and then I'll show you the brushes that I'm gonna use. See, a while back I picked up this brush set here on Amazon, which is perfect for cleaning out these little caliper openings. Look, you can see I've used a few of these sizes quite a bit, but I'm gonna use the nylon one over here, and it also comes with a little handle. Just pop that on, and then take a look. We can clean that with all that brake cleaner in there, and get all that gunk and old grease out of there. Let's do this side as well. All right, let's do it again. Now, I guess if you wanted, you could also put this on a drill and spin that really well, but this looks like it's working just fine. All right, that should be good. Now we'll let that dry for a minute. All right, now this is the grease I'm gonna be using, this Versachem synthetic caliper grease, and that works really well on slide pins and any of the contact points. It's a real pretty blue color. All right, now you don't wanna get too carried away with this grease, just a good amount, but we are wanting to be a little bit more generous because I did completely clean that out. Pop this in. Now when you push it in, a lot of times you have to squeeze the boot and burp any of the air. You heard that little burp. Huge difference. That is sliding easily and freely, and just squeeze that boot and we're in good shape there. That looks like that one's perfect. Let's do the other one. Again, the bushing here might be a little swollen. Let's take a look and see how it works. If it's binding up, then I'll have to either take it off or cut it, but it might go in just fine. Yep, that's going to be an issue. So now you can get a replacement, or you can slice a little piece out of that little relief there, or you can just abandon it. I'm going to try the little slice trick, and then we'll see if we can get this to fit in. All right, so if you can see right there, there's a little piece of this rubber. I just got a little razor blade here. I'm just trying to slice that off. Just be real careful here, don't slice your finger. I think that's a part of the reason that it's getting stuck and not going all the way in. There you can see I just cut off that little rubber piece off the end. That was, I think, binding this up, but I'm also gonna make a little relief cut here in that little channel just to make it a little bit deeper. Not cutting all the way through, but that should allow the air to escape, or some of the grease, because it's not compressible. So you need to be able to have a little bypass, otherwise it'll bind like it was doing. And I maybe kind of butchered this one a little bit, but hopefully you get the idea, as long as you're very careful with that razor blade. Okay, I'm gonna do another one on this side. I showed this on another brake video, and it does work pretty well. You know, it's probably better just to buy a new one, but I don't know if they even have a part number for this. There's another piece that I cut out. All right, now let's grease this back up and see if it'll work. That's way too much. Perfect. Look at that. We are good. Now you can see it wants to push out a little bit. Just have to burp out that air by squeezing that boot. Now I'm just kind of sliding it in and out, back and forth a little bit, just to make sure that the grease is dispersed throughout there, and then squeezing it again just to make sure we get out all the air. There it is. So this is now moving in and out and sliding easily. Now that's all greased up. Slide pins are all set. We just need to put our hardware on. And a lot of times nowadays I will brush just a really thin coating of this stuff, more as a protectant rather than a lubricant. Just seems to really cut down on the rust buildup underneath those shims or underneath those abutment clips. Okay, and then we can just line up the new clips and snap them in place like that. Okay, there they are. There's all the new clips installed. Just make sure that those press all the way in, that they're nice and flush, and they're not sticking up at all, otherwise your brake pads can hang up. Now this is ready to go back on, but before we put it on, I'm going to clean up the bolts that we took out and put some thread locker on there. Now again, make sure you wear some safety glasses. I'm just going to use that same little wire wheel on a drill and clean these bolts up. Just a little dab of thread locker on there. This is medium strength by Permatex. That should do. All right, and then we can hold the bracket up there while we get these bolts started. And we'll snug these up with the little battery powered Milwaukee. All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and torque these to 79 foot-pounds. All right, now the old pads that I took off did not have the little noisemaker or squealer on them. That's usually gonna go on the inside pad, so I'm gonna put it on this one right here. These little noisemaker squealers come in the package, and they just clip right onto the end of the pad, like that. And these also have a little special orange coating, which is designed to clean the rotor on its initial use. But now I do like to put just a little bit of that same grease on the ends of the pad here. It just prevents it from getting bound up or sticking in there. And we can just line this up and pull it in place. Same with the outside one here. And I just have to line it up at a little bit of an angle and press it on, and that looks good. All right, now these already have a nice shim on the back, but it really seems to help cut down on some of the noise and vibration if you add some of this to the back of each pad. This is the Permatex Silicone Ceramic Extreme. This stuff right here, it's really high temperature, and it seems to help dampen some of the vibrations that can cause noise, so I like to put it on. Now, before we put this caliper back on, it's important that you just kind of clean this up a little bit and take a close look at the boot here, make sure that it's not cracked or torn and that it's all the way pushed in. Sometimes these will bubble up and you need to pull them back just a little bit to let out some of the air, but this one looks like it's in good shape and it's pressed in all the way, so we can just line that up and put it over our pads. Like that. Sometimes you need to pull in a little bit on those slide pins to get it to line up, and then we can put our caliper slide pin bolts back in. You can see there's little flat spots on these caliper slide pins that will line up with this flat edge to prevent this from spinning while you're tightening it. Now I'm just going to zip these snug real quick with the Milwaukee, like so, and then we'll get these torqued. All right, now we just need to tighten these to 25 foot-pounds. And you're done. Now it's very important that you go in the car and step on the brake pedal several times until it feels firm. What that will do is push this brake caliper back out, pressing those pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Now when you do that, just step down halfway several times until it feels firm. Don't press the pedal all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in the master cylinder. And don't forget to double check the master cylinder fluid level. Make sure it's all topped off where it needs to be. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description to some of the parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.